I'd seen just about every kind of madness out here in the Utah desert. But nothing could have prepared me for the morning I discovered an HOA gate welded across my private road. There was no warning, no permission, nothing except a massive steel barricade telling me I needed their approval to reach my own home. 15 minutes later, my cop buddies arrived, and I didn't simply remove that gate. I made sure the HOA would regret the day they ever learned my name. I've been living out here for nearly 7 years on 20 acres of rough desert land, tucked so far from the county road that civilization seemed to disappear half a mile before my mailbox. That road was my pride. For 1,000 feet of dusty, uneven freedom winding through sagebrush toward the house I had repaired with my own hands. The deed was crystal clear. Private access. Sole owner. Jacob K. Field. No shared access, no easement, no community authority. It belonged to me. Completely. 7 years of peace. The kind of silence that teaches you to trust your instincts whenever something feels wrong. 2 weeks before the gate appeared, I got my first warning. I stopped at the co-op for dog food and work gloves, and that's where I saw her. Karen Sanders, president of the Cedar Summit Ranch HOA. Aviator sunglasses indoors, a blazer far too formal for a feed store, and heels that would have disappeared 3 inches into actual dirt. Standing beside her was a tall, narrow-shouldered man wearing a beige windbreaker, clutching a clipboard like it could protect him. That was Glenn. Karen was lecturing the teenage cashier about a fresh egg sign. I don't care what the guidelines say. Chaos starts small. She delivered the words like they came straight from scripture. When she spotted me, she gave me that slow up and down inspection HOA presidents seem to be born knowing. You must be one of those off-grid types. Something like that. She told me Cedar Summit valued safety and order, and that they kept track of everything in the area. In the HOA area, I corrected politely. The sharpness in her voice told me she hadn't appreciated it. As she marched away, she called over her shoulder. Come along, Glenn. We have a meeting at 2. There are updates. Something in my stomach tightened. My instincts whispered, this woman is going to be trouble. 2 mornings later, the desert felt different. My dog suddenly sat upright, ears raised, staring toward the road as though he had noticed something we hadn't. Then the bend opened up and I saw it. A massive steel gate, industrial and brand new, welded straight across the entrance to my private road. Fresh concrete was still soft around the posts. The welds were dark and recent, with a keypad and a sign reading, Private Access. Cedar Summit residents only. All entry must be authorized by HOA security. Cedar Summit was more than a mile away, separated from my property by every legal boundary that mattered. I pressed one finger into the concrete. It was still warm. This had gone up. Within the last 24 hours, probably while I was asleep. A small black camera watched me from the post. Then came the real shock. This gate wasn't keeping strangers off my property. It was keeping me from getting home. I took a dozen pictures, then turned my truck around. Not home. Cedar Summit. It was time to get answers. The HOA clubhouse stood in the middle of the development like a government building, trying desperately to look elegant. I pushed open the meeting room door without knocking and raised my phone. Want to explain why I can't get home? Karen didn't even flinch. Cedar Summit is expanding its protective buffer. We're implementing new access controls. To my land? My private road? My deeded property. You rural types always misunderstand jurisdiction. She laughed before handing me an authorization form. Fill it out. The board approves it, and they'll issue you a temporary code. You want me to request permission to drive across my own property. As I said, standard procedure. You've completely lost your mind. She told me the meeting was over. I planted both hands on the table. You're removing that gate today, and if you don't, then I'm calling the county. I'm calling the sheriff. They're going to have a field day with what you just did. Her smile faltered for just a second. I pulled over near the county road and called Lieutenant Mark Dorsey. It's Jake. I've got a situation. What kind? The illegal kind. I'll be there in 15. Exactly 15 minutes later, he walked the final 100 yards with me and stopped cold when he saw the gate. They welded this. Last night. Looks like criminal obstruction. Yep. He reached for his radio. Wheeler, get over here. Bring a toolbox. Then a white SUV marked with the HOA logo pulled up, and Karen stepped out with her clipboard. Officers, can I help? You? Dorsey didn't hesitate. Yeah. You can explain why you installed a barrier across private property. She immediately started talking about the protective buffer. No, ma'am. It doesn't. You don't get to make your own laws. Karen insisted the gate was HOA property. I told her it was trespassing. Equipment. Dorsey pointed toward Wheeler. Cut it. The bolt cutters snapped shut. The lock hit the ground. The gate sagged, and Karen's jaw dropped right along with it. She slammed her clipboard closed. This isn't over. She turned to leave, her heels sliding across the gravel. She caught herself, climbed into the SUV, and she threw it into reverse. The tires screamed as they spun uselessly in place. She lowered the window 2 inches. It's the terrain. The soil is unstable. Dorsey stared at her. Ma'am, that's called user error. She floored the accelerator and fishtailed away in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. I stared at the broken gate lying across the dirt. She's not finished. Dorsey slowly nodded. Jake. That's when people like her become dangerous. The next morning, a forwarded email landed. On my phone from the Cedar Summit Community Bulletin. Urgent safety announcement. The message read, yesterday, an unidentified male instigated damage to authorized community security equipment, coordinating with aggressive individuals to compromise neighborhood safety. Karen had watched Officer Wheeler cut the lock herself, so she simply twisted the entire story. Residents should avoid the northern access road until further notice. The instigator is non-compliant, unverified, and potentially hostile. Potentially hostile? I had barely raised my voice. Beneath the warning were blurry screenshots from the camera they had installed along my road, with red circles drawn around me. Oh, Karen, I muttered. You're playing a dangerous game with the truth. Around noon, an envelope with no return address appeared inside my mailbox, marked Cedar Summit Ranch Authority. Notice of assessment. Comic Sans font pastel. Blue headers. Citation. Unauthorized tampering with community safety infrastructure. Fine amount, $6,400. Due immediately. Failure to comply may result in escalation protocols. I burst out laughing because stamped in the corner was their official-looking seal. The Utah Department of Rural Transportation and Infrastructure. They had misspelled infrastructure, and that department didn't even exist. I sent a picture straight to Dorsey. Jake, you're holding evidence of felony-grade fraud. At 7:12 that evening, an unknown number texted. We need to talk. She's going too far, Glenn. Someone inside her own board was reaching out, which meant she had crossed a line even her own people couldn't defend. People like Karen don't accept losing. They double down on stupid. And when I stepped onto my porch the following afternoon, there it was. A brand new gate, thicker posts, an electronic keypad, a Bluetooth receiver blinking like a Christmas light, and fresh hardware. It shipped with ridiculous default passwords, which was exactly why my nephew had given me a Flipper 0. My phone detected the device almost immediately. Code 0000. I actually laughed. Record the signal. Replay it. Click. The gate swung open like it was welcoming me home. I repeated it 3 times. Not luck. Just terrible security. And my trail cameras recording every second. I never expected Karen to return at 2 in the morning, but that was exactly when I heard tires crunching. Over the gravel, moving slowly and suspiciously, I stepped barefoot onto the porch and watched. Karen emerged first, her hair tied back, wearing a black windbreaker. Behind her stood a tall, bearded man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. She hammered the keypad. Nothing. Bluetooth devices stopped pairing after several minutes, and Karen didn't know the code. But I did. I tapped a Button on the flipper 0, and from half a mile away, the gate clicked and swung open on its own. Karen jumped like she had just seen a ghost. "Someone is remotely hacking our safety equipment," she whisper-yelled. She had absolutely no idea how right she was. Then she pulled out her phone and began photographing traffic cones, reflective tape, and a crowbar she had brought along. Staging the scene, placing the crowbar down. Photograph. Moving it an inch. Another photograph. Her evidence. "This road is a crime scene. I am documenting it." Coyote howled. Karen froze, swept her flashlight across the darkness, and stepped backward directly onto her own crowbar. It clanged against the gravel. She flailed, stumbled, and knocked over 2 of her own cones. She quickly shoved everything into the trunk and fishtailed away like a wounded jackrabbit. She had no idea every second was captured on camera. "Karen, you picked the wrong man on the wrong road." By the next afternoon, nothing. No letter, no retaliation, which meant Karen was planning something. Then my phone buzzed. "We need to talk privately. I know what she's doing. Meet me at the old feed store." 5 minutes. Glenn was leaning against a dusty silver Hyundai, his arms crossed like a man, preparing for a storm. "You have cameras on your property, right?" "Plenty." He let out a long breath. "I can't keep doing this. She's gone too far." He had been with her at 2 in the morning. She told the board she was homesick. "Let me guess," I said. "She brought cones, tape, and a crowbar." "You saw that. Cameras. They caught everything." Then he handed me a folded stack of papers. "I made copies. If she finds out, she'll skin me alive." Inside were Karen's written plans. She wouldn't fight back. Guys like him don't. They don't know the law. Another one said, "If we control the road, we control him. Doesn't matter what the deed says. Pressure works." And then came the worst part. "If we need an agreement on file, just make one. Allen's in Alaska. No one's checking signatures. Proof of intent." Finally, this was enough to destroy her entire case. "That's why I'm not putting my name on it," he said quickly. "I've got a mortgage, a wife with medical problems." I nodded. "Then, your name doesn't exist. Our conversation never happened." Before he drove away, he stopped. "She's planning something bigger, something stupid. She'll escalate." The next morning, I walked toward the road with my coffee. The gate motor hiccuped, grinding and struggling, caught halfway between open and closed like a confused robot. Then it stopped and locked in place halfway. Open like a drunk man who couldn't decide whether to sit or stand. I almost spit out my coffee. Bluetooth desync. "Bless your heart, Karen." At 9:17, the white SUV pulled up. Karen attacked the keypad. Nothing. She punched it, shoved the gate, kicked the post. Then she tried pairing her phone with the receiver, and I could hear the angry beep 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 of repeated failed attempts. Nothing worked. The flipper 0 pulsed inside my pocket, but I didn't touch it. Karen was digging her own grave. I wasn't about to hand her the shovel. After 10 minutes, she removed her sunglasses, and I could see her eyes were wild and desperate. Karen was spiraling. She finally drove away, and I called Dorsey. He confirmed there was no permit on file, then suddenly went quiet. "Jacob, is that camera new?" Up in an old juniper tree, half hidden among the branches, sat a little black camera bearing the HOA logo, pointed directly at the gate and toward my house. "That's surveillance on private property." "Yep, without consent." "Nope, that's felony territory. She's burying herself." Then tires rolled slowly up the road, sounding guilty before the vehicle even appeared. Glenn climbed out, visibly shaking, carrying another stack of copies. "Lieutenant, you need to see this. She's calling a board vote tonight to secure all access points affecting resident safety. She's calling your road a public necessity corridor. She's printing charts and maps, claiming fire hazards. None of it makes sense, but the board is scared of her." Dorsey cursed. "She's trying to fabricate jurisdiction." Glenn's voice trembled. "I'm scared of her. She's treating this like some kind of frontier war. After Glenn drove away, Dorsey looked directly at me. Jacob, if she pushes this any further, the DA opens a full file. Perjury, fraud, evidence tampering, surveillance, violations, attempted seizure of private property. Back at my porch sat a large manila envelope. No mail carrier comes this far down the road. Someone from Cedar Summit had left it. Inside was a single-page legal agreement printed on aged parchment between Cedar Summit Ranch HOA and Parcel B17. At the bottom was a signature. Alan M. Brody, owner. My stomach dropped. Alan Brody had moved to Alaska because the county installed a speed bump near his driveway, and he called it socialist pavement fascism. There was no way he'd ever sign anything involving an HOA. Beneath his forged signature were Karen R. Sanders, president, and a shiny red stamp. But the worst part was that the document was supposed to look 7 years old, yet it was printed in Cambria, a font that didn't even exist when Alan sold me the property. The watermark was a blurry clip art tree, pulled from Google Images. It was the dumbest forgery I'd ever seen. And this was the weapon she planned to put in front of a judge. I called Tom Delgado, my attorney. You might want to bring your green binder. The one for fraud cases. That's the one. I'll clear my afternoon. By the time the hearing arrived, the entire county seemed to be holding its breath. Cedar Summit had filed their complaint packed with wild accusations and legal nonsense. But Tom and I arrived carrying enough evidence to bury a small town. Karen showed up 10 minutes late, arms loaded with binders, and behind her was a young HOA attorney who looked like he'd Googled how to become a lawyer the night before. Judge Holloway entered with steel gray hair and the expression of someone completely finished with ridiculous rural drama. Karen's attorney stood. First, Your Honor, this case is about safety. It's about protecting the community. Tom immediately stood. Objection. Argument. Not fact. Sustained. The judge snapped. The young attorney visibly deflated and changed tactics. We'd like to submit this access agreement, signed by the previous owner of Parcel B17, granting joint jurisdiction of the road to Cedar Summit HOA. There it was. The forged agreement. Tom didn't hesitate. Your Honor, that document is fraudulent. Explain. First, the signature. Alan Brody is alive and has provided a sworn statement saying he never signed anything involving an HOA. Second, the paper was purchased 2 months ago at a local print shop. We have the receipt. Third, the font, Cambria, wasn't commercially available 7 years ago when this document claims the signature was dated. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Your Honor, this document isn't merely fake. It's insultingly fake. The judge turned toward Karen. Were you aware this agreement was fabricated? Her hands trembled. I was told it was in our archives. I didn't check. So you submitted it under oath without verifying whether it was authentic? Silence. But Tom wasn't finished. He presented the Slack messages containing her own words. Just make a fake agreement. Alan's in Alaska. No one checks signatures. Karen sank into her chair as though her bones had suddenly disappeared. Judge Holloway leaned back. I'm prepared to rule. The courtroom became completely silent. First, the lawsuit against Mr. Cafield is dismissed with prejudice. Second, Ms. Sanders is fined $25,000 for submitting falsified evidence. Third, Cedar Summit HOA will pay $84,000 in restitution and legal fees. Fourth, Ms. Sanders is removed as HOA president, effective immediately. Finally, this matter is referred to the district attorney for review under Utah criminal law for document tampering and fraudulent filing. The gavel came down. Like thunder. Karen didn't cry. She simply cracked quietly, completely, like porcelain dropped onto concrete. She had walked in expecting to seize my road. She walked out lucky she wasn't wearing handcuffs. 2 days later, the county hauled away the twisted metal that had once been Karen's gate. It was loaded up as scrap. because that's all it ever was. Tom pulled up. For sale sign went up on Karen's place this morning. They're leaning on the house to cover the HOA's legal bills. Good. She paid for the show. That evening, I fired up the grill because nothing says victory like a slow-cooked ribeye and mesquite smoke. Dorsey and Wheeler showed up off duty. Glenn came too, still nervous. I waved him over. You did the right thing. I'm trying to, he said quietly. We ate on the porch. Paper plates, cold beer. The kind of silence that only exists between people who've been through something real. Dorsey raised a bottle to private land. Tom clinked mine. And to corrupt HOA presidents learning their limits, I raised my bottle one final time. To boundaries, may we always know where ours end. I paused. And where the HOA can shove theirs. The desert was silent again. Before we finish, there's a lesson in Jacob's story. When you're dealing with a power-hungry HOA or an entitled neighbor, your first instinct is usually to lose your temper. Jacob won, because he did the exact opposite. He used the ultimate weapon, patience and documentation. He didn't smash the gate himself. He let law enforcement handle it. He didn't argue over her fake contract. He let his lawyer tear it apart in front of a judge. The biggest takeaway is simple. If someone tries to bully you out of your rights, let them keep talking. Let them make mistakes. Document everything. Know your property laws and let them dig their own grave. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare? Share your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another revenge story. Thank